In this video, I'm gonna talk about CrossCode. This is everything that I have ever wanted in an MMORPG. Monsters to kill, exotic locales to explore, and not a single human player to get in my way. I am free to do my own thing without having to go on an LFG to recruit some shitty healer, 2 piss poor DPS, and find out that in the end, nobody wants to play the tank. All of these problems are conveniently brushed away with one small and effective idea: we single-player the MMORPG, and we laugh at everything the genre stands for. Every aspect of the experience is lampshaded, parodied, subverted, inverted, degloved. I am flabbergasted that the TV Tropes article is not any bigger than it is. The story involves a young lady waking up in the game with no memory of how she got there, and a Russian hacker by her side to tell her what to do. All it takes is the one brain cell that keeps you from uncontrollably taking a shit on the floor to figure out that this is the perfect setup for a plot twist halfway into the action, and nobody is even trying to hide it. Until you get to the inevitable plot twist, you get to explore colorful locales such as grassy plains, basic desert, rainy jungle, Nepal, grassy plains version 2.0, Japanese garden, classy city, the usual peppering of dungeons, and some spoilerinos for good measure. Because this plays like an MMO, it means that most of the monsters will not attack you unprovoked. This leaves you at liberty to explore at your leisure and find the 28 billion chests hidden in the game world, oftentimes in places where you wish you could rotate the camera to get a better angle on your jumping. You do not need to time your jump, the character does that automatically, but the problem lies more in the forced perspective and the fact that some platforms are in a different place than your eyes were expecting. And because this plays like an MMO, you will have to fight at some point if you want to hope to increase your level and survive the next plot points. You have access to melee attacks, ranged attacks, blocking, and dodging, and the meaning of all these actions boils down to nothing because you will be mashing every button on the controller in complete and absolute panic. The thing is that between your party members, the half-dozen monsters you pissed off, the screen shakes, and the special effects exploding all over the place, it is practically impossible to track your own self on the battlefield, let alone the incessant flood of attacks coming at you. Not to worry, however, this is where you can delegate all the hard work to your party members and kite the enemy while you wait for your merry men to get the bad guys off your back. Solo experiences in dungeons turn the game from an MMO to a straight copy of The Legend of Zelda, in which you will spend a fair amount of your time simply trying to open the door to the next area. These puzzles are no mere formalities either. They can and they will test everything that you learned, all to the benefit of mentally equipping you for the surgical fights you will have to do. Bizarrely, when you are made to fight alone, everything goes from frantic to cerebral, and each fight becomes a puzzle to unravel instead of a test to figure out if you still have the reflexes of the 12-year-old version of yourself. You obviously do not, so this is where you get tempted into going into the accessibility options to decrease enemy damage and puzzle speed. I am aware that the game can be made easier this way at no cost, but I am in my midlife crisis, and leaving the challenge dialed at full strength is my version of driving a new convertible so everyone can witness my receding hairline as I launch control from a dead stop to 20 miles per hour on a residential street. Choices of equipment consist of gear with increasingly better statistics and a peppering of additional perks that will go largely unnoticed in the heat of the action. All of this culminating into a few builds of endgame equipment focused on one of your primary stats. Some of these pieces of gear are obtained not from usual shops, but from NPC traders scattered around the world, and who take other items as a form of payment. Keeping track of what is required and where it can be found is the exact reason why Microsoft Excel will once again sell millions of copies this year. While you have the software open, you will want to create another spreadsheet to keep track of all your power-up items, because while healing is done by simply inhaling a sandwich in a few seconds, your means of getting a temporary boost to your stats is done using all sorts of food items with arbitrary names that deliver a combination of effects that look more like the winning numbers of the Powerball lottery than anything else. No RPG is complete, of course, without the presence of a skill tree. It grows to dizzying proportions very quickly, but most of the upgrades are passive, and their effects are felt on the long term rather than changing the game entirely at the drop of a hat. One exception, however, is the list of special moves, which almost always comes in two flavors, and you can swap between them at no cost if you are not happy with your decision. When things get serious, then most of the humor is cast aside in favor of experiencing a bright and colorful art direction, a soundtrack that strives for enough memorable variety, and a story that knows what you expect as a player and uses that knowledge to throw you a curveball and keep things interesting. That said, you may need to play for a few hours before this all picks up in a meaningful way, and then you are off to the races for the 50 to 60 hours offered by a first run of the game if you try to consume most of its content. Once you are done with the story, you get the chance to go at it again, with the option to tweak some of the game's mechanics either to your advantage, or in an attempt to seek a bigger challenge for the sake of proving your own bravery and stupidity. There is no achievement linked to this part, so the New Game Plus mode can be considered the game's way of allowing you to goof off and break the rules after you have followed them for so long. This is all a lot of infrastructure for what amounts to bits of combat and puzzles and storytelling, but this also highlights how much work is really required to make the experience run like it should, and not feel like a cheap Chinese knockoff of life itself. To put it another way, you sometimes have to be your enemy to know your enemy and exploit its flaws appropriately. The reason that this game can poke fun at RPGs is because it is also what it seeks to poke fun at, while at the same time trying to smooth over the historically rough parts of the genre. The cost of this is your entire history of video gaming, starting in the 16-bit era, missing out on staples such as Secret of Mana, Legend of Zelda, and any Korean MMORPG whatsoever means that some of the game's references will fly 6 butronomical units above your head. The baseline story can be enjoyed by anyone without a problem, but all the spices and side dishes that bring a rich flavor to the experience demand that you have gone around the block a few times and experienced the frustrations that made you into the person you are today. If you kept playing and growing as a consumer of video games, you will be able to appreciate these days gone by, while also recognizing the progress that has been made since then. If you peaked at the PlayStation 1 and then turned around and declared on your 18th birthday that video games are for children, you will get to appreciate the story for what it is, while also identifying with all of the caricatures that the game laughs at, without realizing that the person being made fun of is you. In short, this game is a high school reunion.